So when we work on visual literacy and teaching English to young learners, what we want to make sure we're doing is meeting children where they are, right? They're getting their information increasingly in visual ways, so we should meet them where they are and present information in ways that they are accessing information. In addition, we have to build important 21st century skills, which include building their visual and digital literacy. So today, the English language classroom requires us as teachers to incorporate new literacies and prepare students to gain information in these ways. So I'd like to suggest these 4 different ways. Exposing children to visual images from around the world, exposing children to all types of information graphics and graphic organizers, enhancing critical thinking skills to interpret visual images, and providing opportunities to create, not just interpret, visual images. Okay, so just to start and give you a few examples, we want to expose children to visual images from around the world. I mean, imagine this, right? They're using English as a global language. So, since global communication in English is also increasingly visual, why not expose them to images from around the world? So even if they're in preschool, this is an example from Welcome to Our World, which is our pre-primary program that is just about to come out. We can teach the concepts of wet and dry by exposing them to images of the world. So believe me, your children will learn about wet and dry through these 2 tigers, and they're never going to forget those words. And now it's amazing and beautiful. If you want to teach a concept loud and quiet, well, I mean, we can connect children to people around the world through images. Here we're teaching about the concepts loud and quiet using photos with real children around the world showing their real lives. So we're teaching vocabulary and concepts through imagery with expressions and movement that help to make the words comprehensible, but also evoke feelings and make concepts that much more memorable. And this is just the start of learning to interpret visual images. Take a look at this photo about animal friends. And it's a true story. This monkey was very sick and was abandoned by his mommy. And then this bird helped to bring him back to life. So if we were to look at this visual image, we might work on what I call visual literacy inquiry. Trying to get students to pull things from the video, right? Asking them, what am I looking at? Or what are you looking at? Where is it? Who is in it? What is happening? How does the image make me feel? What does this image mean to me? What is the story behind this image? And then as they start to explore more, you can introduce them to images from around the world with other people and lifestyles. Okay? So here, what do we see here? Are you familiar with this image? Now, you can do visual literacy inquiry, but it also becomes a cross-cultural visual literacy inquiry. Okay, so this is a photo of a floating market in Thailand. And as students begin a unit on fresh food, you might lead them in a visual inquiry that also helps them to interpret the image cross-culturally. Okay, in this case, we might just say, okay, what do you see in the photo? Okay, right, it's a floating market. Okay, you might give them the words. Who are the people in the boats? Okay, they're farmers bringing their food to the market. What are they doing? Okay, they're on the boats. I actually had an experience of buying fruit at a floating market in Thailand. But you might ask them, well, can I find this in my country? Do we have something similar? Where do we buy fresh food? So the idea is through visual inquiry, trying to actually build their cross-cultural skills and knowledge, which is extremely important when using English as a global language because you're encountering all different cultures. So 2, we want to expose children to all types of information graphics and graphic organizers. So quickly, I can do the same activity. We can look at a text, right? I can expose you to a text like this. But of course, like the first literacy test, you probably can't say much about this reading. But not only that, text in the 21st century is hardly ever presented like this. It's usually presented like this. And as you can see here, it's laid out using headings, the use of color, right? The photos, the information graphics used. We can see we're comparing two big birds, right? The cassowary and the ostrich. This is more similar to how text is actually presented in the real world. So in this example from our world, we're also trying to teach students how to use graphic organizers. So we see here the Venn diagram. It's connected with the text by color, right? The use of color helps them to understand the concept of the Venn diagram. So the cassowary is on the left in blue. The ostrich is on the green and right. This is important scaffolding for young learners to begin to understand this commonly used graphic organizer. So I just want to hammer home the point that we need to present educational materials that reflect real text. Our world is increasingly visual and digital. Okay, we should present information this way and encourage our young learners to become literate using the same visuals. So you see on the other side, we're getting them to also use a graphic organizer in addition to interpreting them. All right. I'm almost done here. 2 more points. So if you can hold on, we'll get through them together. So I'd like to talk about enhancing critical thinking skills to interpret visual images. This is something that John Hughes talked about, right? Critical thinking skills. And here are 2 examples. Okay, this first one, I'm posing a problem to you. Now, how many of you use Google Maps? Because this is just a screenshot of a Google map. Yes, everybody's saying that they do. It's very common. Now, here's a problem that can be posed to young learners to help them think more critically about the images they see and use online. So here you see a screen capture of a Google map. On this map, okay, take a look here. Okay, right here, this is Greenland, and here's Africa. And they look about the same size, am I right? But in fact, Africa is 14 times larger than Greenland. Here's another visual image of the actual landmass. Okay, this is called Map Fight, and it's an app you can get online. You can put in any continent or country here in red, any continent or country here in blue, and then have a map fight. See which one is bigger. You can spend hours and hours and hours on this app comparing your country to all the others in the world. Now you can see here Africa is 13.94 times as big as Greenland. So why is this map incorrect? I see some people who say because of the globe, maybe because the Earth is spherical, it's not flat. And I see Angela says Mercator projection on the previous map. That's right. So one of the explanations is that there's a Mercator line that exists here that was developed for navigation purposes from Europe to the Americas. And maps were created based on this line rather than what's down here, which is the equator. So what happens if you create the map based on this line is everything in this area looks much bigger. Everything below, especially below the equator, looks much smaller than it actually is. So why is that? Why are we using a map that's not quite accurate? That's what you might want to get your students to think critically about. Is it just the tradition of map making, or is it a much more Eurocentric view of our world that makes Europe, North America, look bigger than it actually is, and make these areas in the world look smaller? Something to think about. So another way you can get your students to think critically, and this is very important, is to get them to think about the decisions that they make. In this case, this comes from our world. You'll see this is a mission page which focuses on good values for our children to be successful in the real world. And in this mission page, it asks students to be aware of why you're making decisions. And in this unit, it tries to help students to become a little more aware of why they want to buy something. So it asks them to be an ad detective. So if you take a look here real quickly, the text says, okay, let's look at some advertising techniques like group pressure. An ad shows a lot of young people, each with their own mobile phone. Message, everyone has a mobile phone. You need one too. Or association. Everyone looks happy and healthy in the ad. They're cool and beautiful too. Message, if you buy the product, you will be happy and cool like these people. So it goes on to teach all of these advertising techniques, then get students as a project to make a collage of ads. They look at ads that they can find, and then you get them to think critically about it. So imagine they brought this ad. Have you seen this ad? It's for the new skinny can for Pepsi. And if we look at this, what might we get our students to think critically about? Well, things like who's responsible for the ad? Who is the advertiser selling the product to? Do you want to buy the ad? Why? Maybe because you think you're going to drink it and look skinny like the can or skinny like Sofia Vergara? Does it use group pressure, association, testimonial, a celebrity, an attractive person, time pressure? What type of technique? And what does the ad say or suggest about the product? So, questioning, does this promote good values? If we want our students to really look at these images all around them, trying to convince them to do things or take action, they've got to think more deeply about what those images represent and how it can actually convince them to buy something or think a certain way based on how that image is presented. So the last one is providing opportunities to create, not just interpret visual images. Okay, a visually literate person should be able to read and write visual language. Right? You're not only supposed to interpret the images, you have to learn how to communicate using those images. Okay, so I'm going to end this just by giving you this last video, and I hope that you can hear it. Literacy means learning to read.
If literacy means learning to read and write, then visual literacy refers not only to constructing meaning from visual images, but also to communicating effectively with visual images. Our world encourages students to create real-life forms of communication that can incorporate both text and image. In the project pages, we can find a bar graph showing results from a survey, a poster to save the environment, a tourist brochure, a camp brochure, a recipe, and an advertisement. In Our World student books, there is always a model for students to follow. However, you could also bring in examples of real-life posters, brochures, recipes, and advertisements for students to analyze. Have them look at and discuss the layout, formatting, choice of photos or illustrations, color and size of text, amount of text used, and placement of text versus images. Then have them create their own visual. This is one more way that you can bring real-world content into the classroom to prepare your students for 21st century communication.